The steel gleams in the firelight. The armor is black lacquer and iron scales. The man behind the mask does not speak. He waits. For centuries, the world looked at this figure and saw the ultimate symbol of purity. The samurai, they were the guardians of the island nation. They were the sons of the soil. They were the blood of Japan itself. This was the story told in schools. It was painted on screens. It was written in the history books of the 20th century. The samurai were indigenous. They rose from the native people of the islands. They protected an unbroken line of culture that stretched back to the first ancestors. When Minamoto Yoritomo united the warriors in the 12th century, he did not create a new people. He organized the old one. He gathered the native sons. He forged them into a blade. The blood in their veins was the same blood that had walked these islands for 10,000 years. It was a closed loop. It was a pure line. It was the promise of eternal identity. But the bones do not tell stories. The bones tell facts, and the facts are cold. In a quiet lab in Tokyo, the air hums with the sound of centrifuges. A researcher wears a white mask. She holds a small fragment of bone. It comes from a grave near the city of Osaka. The grave is old. It dates to the time when the warrior class first began to rise. The researcher does not look at the sword buried next to the bone. She does not look at the armor. She looks at the DNA. She extracts the genetic code. She sequences the markers. She waits for the computer to match the profile against the global database. The screen flashes. The result appears. The researcher stops. She leans back. She calls her supervisor. The data does not match the textbook. The blood in the grave is not the blood of the ancient islands. It is not the blood of the native hunters who lived here first. It is something else. It is something new. It is something foreign. That was the textbook version. Then a lab in Tokyo tested a specific set of remains from the Kofun period, the era that birthed the warrior elite. The results did not show a native lineage. They showed a migration. They showed a replacement. The myth of the pure samurai bloodline began to bleed. The crack appeared in the numbers. Genetic analysis from burial sites across the Japanese archipelago revealed a specific percentage. It was not close. It was not ambiguous. The analysis showed that the modern Japanese population, including the ancestors of the warrior class, derives over 80% of its ancestry from a single migration event. This event happened much later than the first humans arrived. The first humans were the Genome people. They lived on the islands for millennia. They were the true natives. They had dark skin. They had thick hair. They hunted deer and gathered nuts. They built clay pots. They were the foundation. But the DNA from the warrior graves showed a different signature. The haplogroup found in the remains of the early elite was not the haplogroup of the Jomon. It was the haplogroup of the Yayoi. The Yayai were not natives. They were migrants. They came from the Korean peninsula. They came from the coastal regions of China. They brought rice, they brought iron, they brought the horse, and they brought the genetics that would dominate the islands. When researchers tested the bones from the Kofun tombs, the large burial mounds built for the chiefs and early warlords, the pattern was clear. The Jomon genetic component was minimal. It was less than 20%. The majority was continental. This means the people who became the samurai were not the descendants of the original islanders. They were the descendants of the people who arrived later. They were the descendants of the colonizers. This number makes the myth impossible to hold. If the samurai were the protectors of the native land, why did their blood belong to the newcomers? If they were the guardians of the ancient tradition, why did their genetics match the farmers who crossed the sea? The textbook said the samurai were the root. The DNA said the samurai were the branch. The branch grew from a seed planted elsewhere. That was the first crack. But when they tested more samples from different centuries, the pattern got stranger. The genetic shift did not happen all at once. It happened in waves, and the waves correlated with the rise of violence. The evidence builds in layers. The first layer is the Genome themselves. Scientists extracted DNA from remains found in Hokkaido and the northern regions. These people lived in isolation for thousands of years. Their genetic profile is unique. It is distinct from mainland Asia. It is distinct from the modern Japanese population. When researchers compared this profile to the modern population, the match was weak. The modern population is not primarily Jomon. The modern population is primarily Yayoi. And when researchers looked further, they found the transition point around 300 BCE. The Yayoi migration began. They arrived in Kyushu, the southern island. They moved east. They moved north. They pushed the Jomon people aside. The archaeological record shows this. The pottery changes, the tools change, the diet changes. But the DNA confirms the violence of the shift. It was not just cultural exchange. It was demographic replacement. The second layer of evidence comes from the Kofun period. This is the time between 300 CE and 700 CE. This is when the great burial mounds were built. These mounds contain the bodies of the chiefs. These chiefs are the predecessors of the samurai. They are the warlords. They are the ones who claimed authority over the land. DNA from these mounds shows a strong affinity with Korean genomes. It shows a strong affinity with Chinese genomes from the Yellow River region. It does not show a strong affinity with the Jomon. This means the elite class was formed by the migrant population. The people with the iron swords were the people with the continental blood. The people with the native blood were marginalized. They were pushed to the north. They were pushed to the margins. They became the servants. They became the subjects. The warriors were the masters. But that wasn't the only surprise. The third layer of evidence changes everything. It involves the specific genetic markers associated with physical traits. The Jomon people had certain traits. The Yayoi people had different traits. The DNA reveals that the warrior class possessed the Yayoi traits. They had the genetic markers for lighter skin. They had the markers for different eye shapes. They had the markers for different metabolic processing of rice. This is critical. The samurai culture is built on rice. The economy is built on rice. The loyalty of the soldier is paid in rice. But the native Jomon people did not farm rice. They were foragers. The people who became the samurai were the people who brought the rice. This means the entire culture of the samurai is not native to the islands. It is an import. It is a transplant. The sword, the rice, the horse, and the blood all came from the same direction. Researchers found this pattern in multiple sites. They found it in the Yamato region. They found it in the Kainai region. They found it in the graves of the high-ranking officials. Every time they tested an elite burial from the period before the samurai formally emerged, the result was the same continental ancestry. High status continental ancestry. Low status was more mixed, but still dominated by the migrant profile. The evidence seems overwhelming. The samurai were not the sons of the native land. They were the sons of the sea. They were the sons of the migration. But there is one problem nobody expected. The genetic data is clear, but the cultural data is confusing. That contradiction changes everything. And 5 dig sites across 3 continents prove exactly how. Here is the twist. The DNA proves the ancestry. It proves the migration. It proves the replacement, but it does not prove the identity. A haplogroup does not equal a nationality. A genetic marker does not equal a loyalty. This is the nuance that complicates the new story. The samurai believed they were native. They believed they were protecting the gods of the land. They believed their blood was special. But their blood was actually a mix. Their blood was actually a result of movement. So why did they fight so hard for an identity that was not genetically pure? Because identity is not biology. Identity is a story. The samurai class constructed a myth of purity to justify their power. They needed to be the natives to claim the land. They needed to be the ancient ones to claim the authority. So they wrote the history. They burned the records that showed the migration. They silenced the voices of the Jomon descendants. They created the myth of the unbroken line. The DNA busts the myth, but it also busts the counter-myth. Some people might say this means the samurai were invaders. Some might say this means the culture is fake. But that is too simple. The twist is that the fusion created something new. The mixture of the Jomon and the Yayoi created the Japanese population. The mixture of the native spirituality and the continental technology created the samurai culture. The DNA cannot prove the spirit. It cannot prove the loyalty. It cannot prove the honor. It can only prove the bone. And the bone shows a mix. The bone shows a journey. The bone shows that the pure samurai was never real. The real samurai was a hybrid. He was a man standing between two worlds. He had the sword of the continent. He had the soul of the island. He was the product of the collision. This contradiction changes how we view the history. It means the samurai were not protecting an ancient static world. They were managing a new dynamic world. They were the rulers of a fusion state. They were the governors of the mix. And when Minamoto Yoritomo raised his flag, he was not rallying the natives. He was rallying the descendants of the migrants who had become the locals. That contradiction changes everything. And 5 dig sites across 3 continents prove exactly how. The first site is in Hokkaido. This is the north. This is where the Jomon people survived longest. Researchers excavated a burial site from the late Jomon period. They found bones. They extracted DNA. The profile was distinct. It matched the indigenous peoples of Siberia. It matched the Ainu people. It did not match the modern Japanese population. This site proves the existence of the true native. It proves that there was a people here before the rice, before the iron, before the samurai. When the Yayoi migrants arrived, they did not just mix. They displaced the DNA from Hokkaido shows that the Jomon people were pushed out. They were pushed to the north. They were pushed to the cold. The samurai culture never reached them. The samurai's swords never touched them. They remained separate. Their DNA remained pure, but their power was gone. They were the ghosts of the land. The samurai walked on their ground, but the samurai blood was not their blood. That was Hokkaido. But the next site told an even stranger story. The second site is in Kyushu. This is the south. This is where the migrants landed. Researchers excavated a Yayoi burial ground. They found hundreds of bodies. They tested the DNA. The profile was different from the Hokkaido samples. It matched the genomes from the Korean peninsula. It matched the genomes from the lower Yangtze region in China. This site proves the arrival. It proves the source. It proves that the new people came from the West. They came across the sea. They brought the technology of war. The iron swords found in these graves are not Japanese inventions. They are imports. The styles match the Korean styles. The manufacturing techniques match the Chinese techniques. The DNA matches the people who made them. The warriors in Kyushu were the first generation of the new blood. They were the pioneers. They were the ones who established the foothold. From here, the expansion began. From here, the lineage of the samurai started. The third site is in Osaka. This is the center. This is where the Kofun tombs are largest. The mounds are key-shaped. They are massive. They contain the bodies of the kings. The researchers tested the bones from the inner coffins. These were the highest elites. The DNA showed a high concentration of the continental haplogroup. It showed very little Jomon admixture. This means the top of the hierarchy was the most migrant. The top of the hierarchy was the most foreign. This is crucial. The people who claimed to be the emperors, the people who claimed to be the divine rulers, their genetics were the most recent. Their genetics were the most continental. The myth says the emperor is the descendant of the sun goddess who created the land. The DNA says the emperor is the descendant of the migrants who took the land. The contradiction is stark. The power was held by the newcomers. The natives were below. The fourth site is in Nara. This is where the first capital was built. This is where the law codes were written. This is where the samurai class began to formalize. Researchers tested the remains from the aristocratic graves. They found a mix. The continental profile was still dominant, but there was more Jomon DNA than in the Kofun period. This shows integration. Over time, the migrants and the natives mixed. The bloodlines merged. The samurai class became a blend. But the foundation remained continental. The structure remained imported. The power structure was built by the migrants, but the labor was done by the mix. The soldiers were the mix. The farmers were the mix, but the leaders were the continental blood. This hierarchy is written in the bone. It is written in the grave. It is written in the genetic code. The fifth site is in Seoul. This is outside Japan. This is on the peninsula. Researchers tested ancient genomes from the Korean Bronze Age. They compared them to the Japanese Yayoi samples. The match was close. The match was significant. This proves the link. It proves the movement. It proves that the samurai ancestry is not isolated. It is connected. It is part of a larger network of migration that swept across East Asia. The samurai did not emerge in a vacuum. They emerged from a wave. They emerged from a tide of people moving east. They were the edge of the wave. They were the foam on the shore. When the wave stopped, they hardened. They became the wall. They became the sword, but the origin was the sea. Every site pointed the same direction. The full picture is more disturbing than any single finding. It shows that the identity of the samurai was a construction. It was a political tool. It was a way to unify the migrants and the natives under one banner. The banner said Japan. The blood said mixed. The culture said unique. The genetics said connected. This is the deeper dig. It is not just about one grave. It is about the pattern across the archipelago. It is about the flow of people. It is about the flow of power. The DNA reveals that the samurai were the beneficiaries of a demographic shift. They were the winners of the migration. They were the ones who held the iron. They were the ones who held the rice. They were the ones who held the story. But the story was a lie. The story said they were the natives. The story said they were the protectors. The story said they were the pure. The DNA says they were the heirs of the change. They were the heirs of the movement. They were the heirs of the mix. This does not make them less impressive. It makes them more human. It makes them part of the global history. It makes them part of the human journey. No population is pure. No culture is isolated. The samurai are not an exception. The samurai are an example. They are an example of how people build identity on top of biology. They are an example of how people build loyalty on top of blood. What this means is that the history we learned is incomplete. The history we learned is a story of isolation. The reality is a story of connection. The reality is a story of flow. The islands were not closed. The islands were open. The blood was not static. The blood was dynamic. The samurai believed they were unique. They believed they were special. They believed their blood gave them the right to rule. The DNA shows that their blood was the same as the farmers. Their blood was the same as the neighbors. Their blood was the same as the rivals. The only difference was the story. The only difference was the sword. This changes our understanding of the warrior class. It changes our understanding of the nation. It changes our understanding of the identity. We cannot look at the samurai as the guardians of the ancient native line. We must look at them as the managers of the new fusion. They were the bridge. They were the link. They were the result. One tweetable insight captures this shift. Blood does not build loyalty. Belief does. The samurai were loyal to the Lord, not to the gene. They were loyal to the code, not to the haplogroup. They were loyal to the story, not to the bone. The DNA proves the bone is mixed. The history proves the belief was strong. The strength was in the mind. The strength was in the culture. The strength was not in the blood. That is what the DNA proved. But there is one thing nobody can explain yet. The Genome people are not gone. Their DNA is still there. It is in the modern population. It is in the north. It is in the south. It is in the mix. But there is a mystery about the Ainu. The Ainu are the direct descendants of the Genome. They are the true natives. They were marginalized by the Yayoi. They were marginalized by the samurai. They were pushed to the edge. Today, their population is small. Their culture is endangered. Their language is fading. But their DNA is the key. The DNA of the Ainu holds the record of the pre-samurai world. It holds the record of the true native. The researchers are testing more Ainu samples. They are comparing them to the samurai graves. They are looking for the missing link. They are looking for the moment when the mix happened. They are looking for the moment when the native became the subject. This is the open question. How did the native people respond to the migration? Did they fight? Did they merge? Did they hide? The DNA shows the result. It does not show the process. It does not show the feeling. It does not show the pain. It does not show the loss. The bone is silent on the suffering. The bone is silent on the choice. We know the blood changed. We do not know the heart. We know the population shifted. We do not know the cost. The samurai history books do not record the Genome voice. The samurai history books record the victor. The DNA gives us the data. It does not give us the dialogue. It does not give us the conversation between the native and the migrant. It does not give us the agreement. It does not give us the conflict. This is the question for the next decade of research. Can we find the voice of the Genome in the genetic record? Can we find the resistance? Can we find the survival? The samurai are the famous face. The Genome are the shadow. The shadow is still there. The shadow is in the DNA. The shadow is in the land. The researchers are speechless because the data is clear, but the meaning is heavy. The meaning is complex. The meaning is human. The samurai were not gods. They were men. They were men of mixed blood. They were men of mixed origin. They were men of mixed history. They were men who built a myth to cover the mix. We must look at the myth. We must look at the mix. We must look at the truth. The truth is in the bone. The truth is in the lab. The truth is in the code. The truth is not in the story. The story is what we tell. The truth is what we find. If you want to see more of what the DNA reveals, subscribe to the channel. We are digging deeper. We are testing more. We are finding more. The history is not finished. The history is being written now. The pen is the sequencer. The ink is the nucleotide. The page is the bone. But the question remains, what defines you? Is it your blood? Is it your story? Is it your land? Is it your belief? The samurai chose the belief. They chose the story. They chose the land. They ignored the blood. They ignored the mix. They ignored the origin. They built the identity. You can do the same. You can build the identity. You can choose the story. You can choose the belief. The blood is just the start. The blood is just a map. The journey is what matters. The journey is what defines. The journey is what makes the samurai. The journey is what makes the human. The lab is quiet. The machine hums. The researcher looks at the screen. The data is ready. The history is waiting. The myth is broken. The truth is here. The truth is mixed. The truth is human. The truth is yours. What will you build? What will you choose? What will you believe? The bone is silent. The voice is yours. The history is open. The page is blank. The pen is in your hand. Write the story. Write the truth. Write the mix. Write the human. The samurai are gone. The armor is rust. The sword is steel. The bone is dust. The DNA is code. The code is life. The life is you. The you is the mix. The you is the story. The you is the truth. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for thinking. The history is yours. The future is yours. The DNA is yours. Use it, learn it, know it, be it. The end is not the end. The end is the start. The start is the question. The question is the key. The key is the DNA. The DNA is the truth. The truth is the mix. The mix is the human. The human is you. Go forward. Go deep. Go true. Go human. The samurai waited. The Joman waited. The Yayoi waited. You do not wait. You move, you mix. You build. You are the history. You are the DNA. You are the truth. The screen fades. The light dims. The sound stops. The silence remains. The silence is the question. The question is the answer. The answer is you. Subscribe for the next dig. Subscribe for the next test. Subscribe for the next truth. The history is coming. The history is here. The history is now. The samurai left the sword. They left the armor. They left the myth. They left the bone. The bone speaks. The bone tells. The bone reveals. The bone is the truth. The truth is mixed. The truth is human. The truth is you. Listen to the bone. Listen to the code. Listen to the truth. Listen to the human. Listen to yourself. The end.